there. Good morning.
How are we doing?
Okay, another dreary day in paradise.
Same thing going on here. It's just kind of frustrating. It's we're past the middle of June now, and it's supposed to be we're supposed to be past June gloom, right? It's supposed to be happening here in Southern California.
No such luck.
Yeah.
Got a bit longer.
Good. Hey, we'll do a quick introduction. A couple things I wanted to hit before we dive in today, but you were I want to readdress for just real quick that live golf and PGA thing we talked about last week about the idea about wanting to be willing and open to make change and so forth and adapting and so forth. But I wanted to hit on that before we dive into the news today. But before we get started, Kevin Brown here with my lifelong friend and co-founder of LeadSmart Technologies, Tom Burton, and we always kind of talk about what we're going to do here on our Around the Horn and Wholesale Distribution session today. So the agenda for today, Tom, we're going to talk a little bit about ChatGPT in your car. All right, we've been talking about ChatGPT.
I can't wait.
Yeah, so it's interesting, kind of pre-show, we chatted for a few minutes. We had some different takes on it. So we'll have some good discussion on that, implications and so forth. Some interesting research out from Forrester and as well as from eCommerce 360 about manufacturer versus distributor websites and where buyer preferences are. And that brings up just a huge can of worms that goes with that. And then there's some great article stuff that we'll talk about today regarding customers starting to use AI and what does that mean for us. And I had a couple of use case experiences with that myself this week. So some of the things we're going to talk about today, but to start with, who are we? Again, Kevin Brown, Tom Burton, co-founders of LeadSmart Technologies. LeadSmart is a customer intelligence, sales enablement, and AI-enabled CRM solution that was developed and designed specifically for manufacturers and wholesale distributions and independent sales agents that function in the wholesale world. So don't sell that product to doctors' offices or construction companies. It's built for a specific industry. So we come to you every week with what we've done is we've kind of taken a look that goes on around the news that goes on around the world and in wholesale distribution as it relates to the economy, e-commerce, artificial intelligence, technology in general, mergers, acquisitions, sales, marketing. We consolidated all that into some great articles. We put it into a newsletter every Friday morning that goes out dark 30 here in California to a few thousand people. It is called Around the Horn and Wholesale Distribution, just like our show and podcast here. If you don't get that each week and you would like to, just send us an email at hello@leadsmarttech.com, hello@leadsmarttech.com, and we'll get you signed up for that. We've had some good experiences of talking to some people this week who we didn't even know were getting it, but brought it up in a phone call. So that's great to see. Last piece of this little intro is if you enjoy what we do each week, whether you're on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, or listening to the podcast, hit the like, the subscribe, or the follow button, whichever one is there, so you can share the information out with your friends. That helps us get more audience, which means we get more comments and so forth as well. So what I missed, Tom?
Sounds good. Good morning to Mike. Yeah, if you're out there, please jump in, especially if you're in a sunny place, and tell us where that is.
Yeah,
because we're in look. I was talking to my wife this morning. I think we're 4 weeks without any sun, other than like a little glimpse maybe at 5:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah,
that's 4 weeks straight. So it's pretty.
I'm spending my day tomorrow out in what we call here in Southern California, the Inland Empire, out kind of near Riverside. And I'll be out there all day tomorrow from 6 a.m. to about 5 p.m. And I looked at the weather because it said sunny and 85. It's like, perfect.
Better wear your sunscreen.
If we could just get that weather here at the beach, it would be great. So, hey, before we dive in today, just kind of a quick little thought, interestingly enough, we talked last week about, and you had some great comments related to the Live Golf Tour, and PGA Tour merging. And, as of early last week, well, I should say a few days afterwards when we were talking about it last Friday, was that, there'd been no response yet from some of the major players. Here we go. Andy's saying up in Portland, it's 70s. Enjoy that, Andy.
I guess there's not a lot of empathy, right?
No. Andy doesn't. It's right. Well, and Andy's an East Coast guy, then an Ohio guy, and then so for those of you listening on the podcast, we get live comments throughout the morning here from listeners and friends and followers and so forth. So Andy's up in Portland, and I've in fact, it's interesting. I make this comment regularly about a day that I spent one time. I think it was in March one time in Seattle, and I was just up there for the day for a couple of meetings. And what's funny is that Andy was in this same meeting with me. It was probably the prettiest day I've ever seen in the Northeast, or in the Northwest, I should say. And what I realized was, to get that sunny day, they need, with all the green trees, they need a whole lot of rain and a whole lot of gray to get as beautiful as it was. So that's kind of funny. But back to that golf tour piece, we tied that back to change, right? It wasn't just about the news. It was about, can we adapt? Can we change? And you talked about some really neat stuff with that. But what was interesting is I read something last night that says, we haven't seen the responses yet, or major responses from some of the golfers who had passed the big money up. Well, like everything, and you talk about this all the time, right? You're going to use a different approach to it this morning later in a discussion, but we always say follow the money. What it appears that's been going on, this was speculation, but is that those players that skip that live money are going to get an equity position in the new organization.
Yeah, I believe that's true. Even the new commissioner said that there was going to be some pretty, think about it, it's a for-profit company, so you'll have option grants, and just like you would in any other thing. So yeah, they're, they'll figure it out. There's enough money and stuff to make it all work.
Good. Well, let's dive into the news a little bit. Let's again, if you're listening on the recording or on the podcast, what our live listeners are seeing is a copy of this email that we send out each week. We've talked a lot in the last few months about the port strike, right, or the potential of the port strike and the work slowdown. So good news is, here on the West Coast, is that there's a tentative deal that's struck. It looks like a 6-year deal. The Department of Labor jumped in and helped negotiate some things. I think they were in Seattle, it said, for the negotiations, but it impacts 29 West Coast ports. So, the clogging of ships out in Long Beach and LA Harbor, which is the biggest on the West Coast, should be narrowing down pretty quick. But still some big impact on supply chain that's happened because of it.
Yeah, it'll also be interesting to see. I mean, it's a 6-year agreement. It'll be interesting to see if that 6-year agreement holds. That's just it seems like, just in the dynamics of what we live in today, whether they'll actually be able to actually make that 6-year agreement work over 6 years, I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see. But at least it's good that it got settled out and some of the clogs can open up again.
It's interesting you say that, because this could be a can of worms. I want to be careful not to open up too far, but it just kind of brings the union piece into things here, and obviously there's always been some level or a place for unions, especially when they first started. But when you read some of the stuff that's been going on, and this article, and this was from CNBC, talks about some of the work shortages, or people just doing their job slowly on purpose, where they've had to literally shut down some afternoons because they can't get enough done to have it worth having everybody there. And that just kind of frustrates me. It's just a big game, and I hate to see it.
Yeah.
So before we go on, two other impacted pieces here, though, right, is they got this deal, which, I think once it's announced in the news like this, they're going to ratify it. There might be some last changes to it, but it wouldn't have been let out this far if they weren't planning to get it done. But now you've got the same International Longshore Workers Union in Canada is already voted to strike, and it could be as early as next week. So maybe there's some points from this deal that talked about that they could come into that, because that could have huge impact in Canada. And then the other side of it is the supply chain issues. It's not that we're out of the woods completely, because I just read about this a couple of weeks ago, and it was in this article, talked about a water level was really low in the Panama Canal. Darlene and I were out to dinner and ran into some friends who had actually had an opportunity to cross the Panama Canal a couple of months ago, and they were talking about how low the water is. So that's slowing things down. And
so how does the water get low in the Panama Canal?
It moves from ocean to a lake there, and that lake, I guess, is impacted by lack of rain and so forth. So,
wow. I've
Okay,
been
I'm
to
going to come
Panama
back next.
once, and that was the hardest rain I've ever been in my life.
Uh,
So
I'll come back next week as an expert on water levels in the
yeah,
Panama
yeah,
Canal,
please
because
do, please do.
I'm actually intrigued by that. So I'll be
Yeah,
reading about that, I'm sure, tonight. Let's move on, my friend.
yeah,
So you want to jump in here, or you want to talk about this Forbes article first?
sure. You know, it's it's interesting, right? Is basically everybody is what it's saying. Is
Yep.
manufacturers wise is intending to raise prices in the second half of 2023. I think in reading through this, and it's not surprising, right? Is that it's if you can, why not?
Hmm.
And so a lot of people are, you're going to be able to get away with it. I think that this is the second major set of price increases, I believe, according to the article that's occurred on a lot of the manufacturing front.
Yep.
But
Exactly.
I even see this in some software. Like some software that I use, business software, they're just raising the prices because they can.
Yeah.
And and I think that is probably some of the risk that we have to this whole inflationary battle is that hey, if people are going to be able to raise prices, they probably will.
Hmm.
Um, and we've probably not even seen a lot of that.
No, I think you're right. To your point about technology prices, I kind of laugh about that. Is we haven't raised any prices or changed any prices in 3 years at LeadSmart, but we were. I don't know if you were on the call. Don't think you were on this call with me. I was on the call with a new large new electrical distributor that's coming on with our product here shortly, and I was talking to one of their people last week, and they were saying that in some e-commerce software that they're looking at is when they can get the people to call them back. Um, I think he said the pricing has changed 3 times in like 4 months that he's been gathering information and trying to put something together with them, which is just astounding to me, right? I mean,
Yeah,
how do you do that to people? But it's one thing, right? When we're in the pandemic and you're trying to get latex gloves and
sure.
isolation gowns and N95 respirators, that's a different story. But in general, but it was interesting. They mentioned these were companies that were polled, and this was Forbes did this with some pretty prestigious companies that do polling and so forth. There were companies between 10 million in sales and 100 million in sales that were talking about these manufacturers. So it was kind of interesting, but was it hit a bunch of other statistics that I thought were interesting, and it talked about investments in artificial intelligence that they're working on and making. It says 69% of them are already adopting and seeing a return on investment in some level of AI. So I thought that was kind of neat to see.
Yeah,
Uh,
I had a question on that.
yeah,
Those must be much larger manufacturers, right? Because we certainly don't see that in the manufacturers that we're talking to that are more in the
correct.
mid market.
Hmm.
So I thought that they didn't obviously talk about who were they looking at, but there's no way we're seeing that sort of adoption of AI in the world we're in.
Correct. I would fully agree with you. What was interesting though is, and I'm interested in your take on this, and this could be a battle discussion for a group of people, but it said a couple of statistics here. 86% of these executives interviewed said they support federal regulations of technology, and almost 95% they said they believe that AI would likely become a top issue for voters. And then 83% expressed support for a formation of an AI presidential task force.
And did they give some of the reasons behind that or
No, just
okay.
that's it.
Okay.
That's all. This was just the recap of the research. But it just, I mean, look, I don't know about the top issue for voters, but just the fact that they support regulations related to this, I think there's some people that have gotten scared out there, and rightly so in some instances, right? Because AI in the hands of the wrong people can do some bad stuff if we're not careful.
Sure. But it'd be interesting to get more perspective on that from just the business side, right? Not hey, I'm afraid that, what the bad actors are going to do,
Mhm.
but is there some aspect of that regulation that they believe could benefit their business or possibly, I don't know, buy time or, not allow them to get overtaken by, I don't know. It'd be
Mhm.
interesting to know the viewpoint on that part of it.
Yeah. Well, what I wonder about it, what comes to my mind as an executive in our company is, I'm not crazy about too much regulation with this, but I think there is, because there's going to be so many bad actors with this, right? It's just the nature of the beast in technology. As we get bad actors involved with this, if there was some, we look at, we have ASTM standards, we have NIOSH standards, we have, Transportation Safety Board standards, we have all kinds of standards around us. If there were some standards put that these organizations met, that's what comes to my mind. It's like, how do I know who to trust? Right.
Yeah, and I do believe that models, the AI models, will start to have good housekeeping seal of approval, for lack of
Hmm.
better thing, or maybe it's probably going to be more like a rating system like you have on movies in some ways,
Yeah.
right? Is, what's involved in it, what are the different levels, all that kind of stuff. I believe that will come. Now, does that have to be government regulated? Can
Hmm.
that be done through just industry? And we'll see, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's two parts. It's very hard to get a result through just saying there's going to be a government regulation. There has to be an agreement on how we're going to go about this. And like you said, I think the NIOSH and all that stuff's a good example.
Right.
Use that so you understand that certain things have occurred and certain checks and balances have occurred before you go do something.
Yep.
Same concept here. Anyway, I know that's not what this topic is about, but um, I think there's a lot of ways to handle it
Hmm.
without necessarily getting government involved. But I do believe that there has to be some understanding and oversight so that people have confidence in what they're getting involved in.
Totally agree. I think that's exactly where we're at. So the last piece on this article that I thought was really interesting says manufacturers are continuing to bring their factories closer to home, with nearly half reporting that they have already reshored some facilities and another third planning to do so. So, we talk about that pretty regularly, about onshoring, nearshoring, reshoring, bringing manufacturing closer, helping out with the supply chain issues that we see on an ongoing basis. So I thought that
Yeah,
was kind of a
yeah.
nice
That
piece.
aligns with one of the articles from last week about all the board
Exactly.
conversations having reshoring.
Yep, exactly right. So good article, Forbes
Okay.
magazine that was there. Enjoyed reading that. So, um, boy, this one's next up here. B2B buyers prefer manufacturers' e-commerce sites. So this was from Digital Commerce 360. I find their newsletter and information they put out, some of their research each week, pretty interesting. If you don't subscribe to that, it might be worth it. But of course, you can get the highlights of that each week from us here on Around the Horn. Just before we jump ahead, Mike Mortensen, it's great to have you with us today, Mike. In fact, Rodney in the East Coast made a nice comment earlier back to our Panama Canal thing. So thanks for that, Rodney. That'll help with my research. But Mike made this comment about AI models with guidelines contained within closed data environments can be powerful good. Loose in the global data environment, it could be destructive. So, Tom, I'm going to let you dive in on that comment. And Mike, thanks for that. I appreciate it. I just met Mike recently. He's obviously a sharp business guy if he's coming here to listen to us each week. But
Boy, I don't know. I don't know if that's sharp
yeah,
or not.
we'll see. Well, our downloads on all the podcast formats are growing. In fact, you know what? I didn't mention this. I was looking the other day. You're usually the data guy here, but I think last week we had downloads from about 9 countries of the podcast. So a
Okay.
handful of them in Europe and Latin America. So it's nice to see. But this is great, right? Now, Mike triggered something here, Tom, and I know you could talk for an hour on this. Is first party data, third party data, data that we're looking at with AI that's our own data within our organization for outside of it. Why don't you hit on that a little bit?
Well, I think we can tie it right into this article, the
Uh-huh.
one that you just talked about. The B2B buyers prefer manufacturers' e-commerce sites.
Yep.
The reason that they prefer it, as they said, is I can get better data there, right? I
Yep.
can go to the manufacturer side, I can get more data, I can get more details, maybe more reviews, whatever the case may be, which makes sense, right? Because if you went to a distributor website, they're dealing with potentially lots of manufacturers that they're
Hmm.
supporting and selling on that marketplace. What's interesting, and this is some testing I've been doing the last couple of weeks, and is building what Mike calls here closed data environments,
Yep.
or private models, if you want to call it that. And what's interesting is the speed of which I have been able to build out some private closed data environments or private models, but using either data from within a company, or in the example here, right? I could take, if I was a distributor, I could actually build a closed data model, but using data from manufacturer websites.
Mhm.
So I can go and read, I mean, it's all public data from there. So I can take data, combine it with my own piece there, and create an experience as a distributor that could be better, as good or better than going to the manufacturer website. So,
We can tailor it to our own needs in that case, right?
well, and
Versus
even to the context, right? If
right.
I'm a distributor, whether I'm a regional distributor or depending upon if I'm industrial or electrical or whatever the case may be, I can now even tailor the experience through a generative chat model or chat bot or experience even on my own website
Mhm.
that's incorporating a lot of that manufacturer data that people want, but at the same time adding the value from the distributor perspective.
Great.
So it's what's interesting about this is that I can totally understand why B2B buyers prefer going to manufacturers' e-commerce sites currently because of that depth of data and depth of understanding. I see this as an opportunity as a distributor to leverage AI, closed data, private models, pulling things from other sources and building their own models that actually could exceed the experience possibly that they would get from a manufacturer, which
Yeah.
is what we're going to have to do if we want to continue to compete on the e-commerce side.
Well, that's great, and this brings up kind of such this good point, right? And it's the next level of something we've talked about a number of times in the past. It's something I've lived with my whole career, being working for a large distributor, and then as a manufacturer's rep, and then a manufacturer, right? It's the look. Distributors play a very specific role that's critical. They're the local people. They can have the local inventory. The original traditional model has been manufacturer ships pallets, distributor ships boxes or eaches, right? But now we're seeing more and more manufacturers who they're selling at full list price, but they're putting retail storefronts on their websites,
Mhm.
and also Amazon stores of their own that are there as well. And so, but this is that rub that's happened forever. It's like, well, is it the story has often been, well, it's good for the brand, it's good for good for everybody that we're out there. Well, now this is saying, hey, Mr. Distributor, you need to, and I'd love, we have a couple of distributors that are here with us today. I'd love their, it's great. I'm looking at some of the people that have logged in and commented both on the different platforms. We have a really broad mix today with us of technology people and wholesale distribution folks. So it's kind of neat to see the crossover there. But the idea now is, in my view of all of this, right? If I'm in perfect scenario, is I'm a manufacturer. I decided to post my products online for sale as well. I'm selling at my list price. I know rarely do my distribution partners sell at list price. I have that there, but now I could build a model in theory, right? That I could give access to my distributors. We're already doing this, right?
Yeah,
They're
but you
already
don't even
doing,
have to do that. You don't even have to go that far,
okay.
right? And that's the beauty of it. And Mike, I think actually said this well. He says, approve third-party
Right.
data sources that enhance your environment. So back up for a minute, right? You just said it. The job of the manufacturer is to create products. That's what they do. They create products. Or this distributor's job is to provide a solution to their customer. That solution could have different products, it could have services, it could have value add, but at the end of the day, they're providing a solution ultimately to their end
Mhm.
user customer there. So yeah, by the man as a distributor, that's the beauty of this. I can go build a distributor, my own distributor private model
Mhm.
using, as Mike called here, approved third-party data sources, which could just be simple links to the website. I'm indexing the websites of my distributors, or I'm sorry, of my
Right.
manufacturers,
Right. Yep.
or whoever that I'm representing, and then layering that with some of my own data and my own expertise to create a conversational type environment that could be a much better solution or a much better experience for my end user, who again is looking for that solution.
Right.
Right. So they have the best of both worlds. They get the data from the manufacturer, but then they also get the value add from the distributor incorporated into the experience through the generative AI model there. So the manufacturer doesn't actually have to do anything. We don't, it's the distributor is kind of, the ball is in the distributor court to kind of pull all this together, which is what I'm learning over the last couple of weeks of how
Well,
fast and how
yeah, it
efficient it
ties
is.
into a bunch of the stuff that you've been building into Lead Smart, right? That
Right.
you've been showing me with some of your late night mad scientist stuff that you've done. But it's really, really cool, where we're aggregating might be too simple of a term. Maybe there's I'm going to come up with the next term for that. So that's where we're really looking at taking it, right? Our product and product, a family of products, is to be able to aggregate this disparate data right across an organization, your ERP, your marketing automation, your e-commerce data, right into a narrative that can be used to sell more product and help your customers better. So that's great. David Gordon made a nice comment. It's nice to have you with us today, David. In fact, David is, I'm just going to mention him real quick because we were emailing yesterday and I've got to get back with him, he's going to join us soon. David is one of the top researchers, consultants, and speakers and writers in wholesale distribution in general, but very, very well known in the electrical market. And so love it when he shares a comment here. But talking about their number of data sources that syndicate information to distributors from manufacturers, some match the enriched content to distributor ERP info. And I love that he mentioned that because it was something I was thinking a few moments ago. A lot of the buying groups are actually working on trying to do that on behalf of their members right now, but they're less AI driven, at least. And I'd love David's comment on this if he's aware of some that have strong AI components to it. But from what we've seen is from the most part is that most of the manufacturers data is just being, to your point, PDF driven, and it's aggregated and then consolidated across platforms.
Well, and we'll talk more. I know we're going to talk a bit more about this coming up on just some of the other articles. So I'll save some of my conversation about search and all that. But I do want to, just before we leave here also, sorry, wrong one. I wanted to add something that Mike said here, right? Is that manufacturers want to go there, but are being forced by distributor channels that are not capable or willing to invest in digital platforms. And that is my point.
Bravo.
That is exactly my point. The beauty of it is, as a distributor, I have a huge opportunity here by doing some of that. And because I can add the additional value of what I'm doing as a distributor, combining with the product data and knowledge of the manufacturer.
Yeah.
So I really, and I have the relationship with the end user. So let's not let that relationship get away. Let's keep that relationship with the end user.
Let's enhance it. Let's enable it further.
Right.
Let's grow it. Right. And
Right.
and I think what we're going to see is, and I'd love both David and Mike that are making some comments. Or by the way, David's going to join us in probably late July or early August here on Around the Horn as a guest, and maybe Mike would consider joining us. I love his comments today. It'd be great to have him join us sometime as well as we talk about these things. But I can tell you, based on my life experiences, there are distributors who drag because they're so good, whether it's at enabling their sales team, using technology, whatever it may be, their own marketing efforts, and probably a big part of it is in marketing efforts, that they're dragging along with them some of their key suppliers. Now, you've got some top tier global manufacturers that maybe do a great job with all the content that they have available, but you've got some smaller, niche organizations that are still living in the Stone Age sometimes when it comes to, how they share data, how they share product information, so forth. So I think what some of this AI is going to be doing, let's kind of nutshell all of this for the sake of time today, but we're entering a place where, a distributor could be, a small distributor can compete with the big guys. A big guy can, with putting the right resources to this, can far surpass what his manufacturers could do because of all the tools that are available, specifically with AI, that can harvest all of this information out there.
Yep. And it allows a regional distributor to be, or a small distributor, local distributor, especially that niche, even gets you even more power of that. And anyway, there's more. We'll actually be showing some of this more to come, because one of our buying group partners we're working on something like this with is, and they're looking at that on how they help their members facilitate that as they go forward. So I really believe there's a huge opportunity. I do agree with this article. It's probably happening right now, but now is the time for a distributor to kind of take back control, and they can do that in a really powerful and valuable way for their
Yep.
customer. So
So this article, kind of before we go out of this, there's some. This was done, combination of groups worked on this, but Joe Sisman from Forrester. Tom, do you remember Joe? You met?
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Joe was a keynote at Affiliated Distributors e-commerce and marketing event last fall, and the great speaker, a really interesting guy. He does. He's a senior guy at Forrester Research, but he also competes in BMX bike events, like trick BMX bike stuff, which is pretty cool. The video he showed in his session, but had a chance to talk to him. In fact, he and Joe and Dirk Beveridge and I got a chance to chat for a few minutes after the keynote that he had done. But really interesting stuff here. But in that research, basically, they say 70% of B2B buyers will increase their online purchasing of goods and services in 2023, right? So manufacturers, to David's point, to Mike's point, to this discussion is, manufacturers need to continue to enable and provide great data to their distributors. And if they don't do a good job, somebody else will, and or the distributor will do it for themselves because the tools are becoming more and more available.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So, I mean, Mike just nailed it here, right? It's shocking to him. And Mike runs a large organization in Alaska, and a distributorship in Alaska. And to see this paradigm shift. And what's interesting, as Mike says, this is, we talk to both manufacturing companies and distributors every day in our business as we, enable their technology expansion or digital transformation, so to speak. And the companies that we see, it's astounding to me, the number of $250 million a year, $500 million a year in sales distributors and manufacturers who might have 15 people in their IT department, but have never implemented a robust e-commerce system.
Yeah.
They've never even truly deeply considered a CRM in their organization.
Yeah.
It's astounding to me, but we see that. So Mike, this paradigm shift as you describe it, I think there's people that are going to be on this curve and sticking with it, and there's going to be people that are going to crash and burn in this shift.
Yeah, and I think also I want to acknowledge what David's saying here as well, is that research show engineers go to manufacturers' websites, contractors, buyers go to distributors. AI has opportunity for distributors as well, and manufacturers don't have, the customer's visibility. No, they don't have that customer visibility. And yeah, engineers will likely go to manufacturers' website because they want that technical data that's there. But I believe what this was saying is these are more buyers, right? The article,
that's what this article was about. And
right.
And what? I'm glad David commented on it. I'm glad you mentioned it, Tom, because that is what, and I couldn't agree more with what David commented, because that's what we've seen and that's what research would show. What this article is starting to say is that they're wanting to buy from manufacturers.
Right.
I'm gonna share a copy of this today's broadcast with Joe at Forrester, and ask him for some feedback on it. We're connected on LinkedIn, and we've emailed a few times since we met him in December, and see if maybe even he'll join us, because that'd be great to have a discussion with. All right, so we're going to jump ahead. This is going to be fun. Let's, each week, again, if you're listening on the podcast with us, which we do this show live on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, Facebook Live every Friday morning. It then later in the day is put in through an editor that we use into a podcast that's available on all the popular podcast formats. If you're listening on the podcast, what the people that we're talking about, Mike and Mike Lauer that was with us earlier, and Rodney and so forth, that made some comments today, and David that have made these comments today, they're all around the country here in North America. We're looking at this newsletter that goes out every week. And again, if you don't get the newsletter, if you would like to, just email us at hello@leadsmarttech.com and we'll get that out to you. So one of the features that we do each week, though, is, or most weeks now, is it's called a special feature. And this week's, we talk about Mercedes drivers can soon turn to ChatGPT for voice control. Wow.
Yeah, maybe. So it's interesting because when I first read that, and I know you use, Alexa in your car, and I use Siri in my car and for different
Siri
things.
sucks.
Yeah, well, anyway, they're adequate but not great.
Mhm.
And what they were saying here is that, yeah, pretty like literally, if you have a Mercedes and you have, I guess, the sound system that's in the Mercedes, you'll be able to you'll get a thing saying, do you want to join the beta program for ChatGPT? And what that allow you to do is actually have conversations through your sound system in the Mercedes. And what they're saying is the value of that could be is, you're driving and saying, okay, where's the local gas station? And they say, well, pull off over here. Well, is there a good taco place next to that? Oh yeah, there is. And then have a conversation right back and forth. And I could certainly see some value of this, but I don't, at first to me, wow, that's like game changing in terms of its capabilities,
Mhm.
but I can in the right direction. But then as I started reading, I did a little more homework, and you talked about follow the money earlier. I think there's a new term that we need to be thinking about now called follow the data,
Mhm.
because data in the AI world is the valuable oil, right? It is the oil, it is the fuel that drives AI. And if you read the fine print on this new Mercedes project or initiative, is Mercedes has access to all of your data. If you accept the terms and conditions of
Yeah.
the service, they have access to all of your data. Well, from the Chat GPT process that you're going to go through in their car through their sound system, this is going to allow Mercedes now to create their own AI models based on data from luxury car owners,
Courtesy of Darlene Brown.
courtesy of Darlene Brown and
Yeah.
others, right? Now you go, well, why would they care about that? Well, data models, and in particular, I'll just call them niche data models, but because you have these large language models, these huge ones, but the future is really going to be a focus of a lot of more, I'll just call them niche data models, and
Mhm.
that are specific to a thing. Now, and you start thinking about, okay, I'm building a data model that is coming from data from Mercedes owners, which is a certain demographic, a certain, so forth. That's a super potentially a very valuable asset for them to be gathering or getting as a
Absolutely.
byproduct of offering this service. And like I said, you got to kind of follow the data in this day and age to
Well,
kind
it's
of
funny
see
you
what's
made that comment earlier, right? And I think as in our intro to our broadcast this morning, I made the comment as well, right? We said follow the used to always say follow the money. Now we're saying
happening.
follow the money and the data,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's
Well,
still
follow the
tied.
data, you'll find the money.
You'll
Right.
find the money. Yeah.
Right.
So it's interesting to watch it. But there, so and that's why we do this each week, right? And for those of you who don't know, Tom and I have been friends since kindergarten. Go ahead, Tom. I had more hair than, I've caused him to lose his hair. But over 50 years we've been friends. Tom is a computer scientist by education, has started and exited multiple software companies and also run those companies. So he brings a technology and a business side. Tom runs product development and all of our expanded AI tools that are coming into our system right now. Tom's managing all of that. And I've spent 30 plus years in wholesale distribution. So we came together to start our company to serve wholesale distribution and manufacturing. So we always have a little bit of a different take on this. So Tom, you went to the data, which you should, right? And by the way, though, your compliment for this week, though, is, I was listening to you talk earlier about distributors and manufacturers, and you're one of the few people out there in the technology world that really understand distribution after the consulting that we've done together before we started Lead Smart. And so congratulations to you on getting it, because most people in the tech world do not get it. But here's my take on this article, right? We're not there, right? This is about a short-term test that Mercedes is doing with, I think, 900,000 vehicles here in the United States that are equipped with their Hey Mercedes technology, right? But your point, I'm an Apple guy. Everything I have is Apple, but I've never been a fan of Siri. Just doesn't work well for me. But I'm a big fan of the Amazon device, right? If I say the word, she'll answer me here in my office. But using that and having it available in my car, I use it constantly because I get a much greater answer than trying to ask. Siri says, some generic data. Alexa takes it to the next level. Yeah, so it's gonna be was listening there closely to me, but Now what we're talking about is that next level. So I already have some of this in my car. You use Siri in your car, but let's go to the next level, right? Let's look at what's going to come down the road. Now, if I'm, an electrical distributor sales guy, a pipe valve and fitting, a power transmission and hose distributor, whoever it might be, and my team's out, John or Judy are out on a job site, and their meeting cancels. Right now, this is where I'm envisioning this, and I think this is our future, right? Is where instead of saying, "Hey, Mercedes," it says, "Hey, Ford, ask LeadSmart which new end user leads that I've gotten in the last 2 weeks that are worth $25,000 a year or more are within 5 miles of me because my meeting canceled." And now it pulls from our system because we have the AI enabled technology, and it helps me recover my day. I'm traveling and I'm in my vehicle, and boss calls and says, "I need you to go call on XYZ customer. You're going to have to fly there because there's an issue with this." Okay, I got that message from my boss. Now, hey, ask LeadSmart what's going on. What are the help tickets that are available for this customer at this point in time? What's our shipment history with that customer? And then the next step is, what are my flight options, and book me a flight.
So I agree. And the way to think about how that's going to manifest likely.
Tom, your volume's way low all of a sudden.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. What I was going to say is I agree with you. And the way that I believe you're going to see that manifest is the same way that you have Sirius XM in your car and you have different channels.
Yeah.
Right. Now, you may have a channel, an AI channel in a conversation, or much like you would in Teams or Slack, where you have channels of conversation. Right. I don't believe that it's necessarily going to be a generic everything under one roof. It's going to
Yep. Good
be,
point.
okay, I'm out on the road and maybe I have one channel that's looking for restaurants for me in an AI channel that's looking for restaurants and gas stations and all that stuff using global third-party data. But now, as you pointed out, I want to find out from my CRM or my data source what I should be doing. I
Only
press
from
another.
This will only ever be available through LeadSmart Technologies in our Channel Cloud product. You'll
Yeah.
never be able to do this anywhere else.
Yeah. And when I get my Sirius XM satellite
Right.
capability, right. But then you would basically, click a button and change a channel, right? And say, okay, now I want to have another conversation related to what you just talked about, which is, hey, my meeting just canceled. Who else in the neighbor should I go see based around the criteria you just provided there a minute ago? So what I believe this will start to manifest, not just in our cars, but in our life,
Mhm.
is we will have channels of things. And that's where the data model I was just talking about, these niche data models will power these channels. So right now you've got this big massive channel called ChatGPT. It's powered by this big massive large language model
Mhm.
pulling all of this stuff off the internet. And that's fine. And that will continue. But then you're also going to have these channels that are using the private data that you have that have very specific, because you don't want that private data intermingled with the bigger channel of all of that everybody else can access
Yeah.
along the way. So that's how I see it will manifest, and how it actually looks in your car or whatever, I don't know. Probably will be all entirely voice activated. So the channels, you may not even know about the channels. It may just happen automatically through but that's basically how I see all that manifesting as we go forward.
Well, I'm looking forward to Monday when you'll have this roadmap for the product team.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
good. All right. Well, I thought that it just, it's one, I love that we have different takes on this, but
Mhm.
as we saw that, but good info. So we also do a little industry scuttlebutt as we talk about each week with the newsletter. So a couple things. I mentioned Dirk Beveridge earlier today. He's researcher, speaker, keynote guy, been around wholesale distribution forever. Dirk does a what he calls his We Supply America tour, and he does that. I think this is as you mentioned here, season 3 is underway. Travels the country seeing wholesale distributors. Great stuff that he does there. So if you're not following Dirk on LinkedIn, great guy to follow. Has some inspirational stuff. Doing a lot of work with HR right now as well. Just a little shout out, ISA, the Industrial Supply Association. They've got their summer sessions going on right now with some great topics. You're speaking a couple of them coming up on these virtual forums that they're having on omni-channel, and a handful of different pieces related to omni-channel, e-commerce, marketing, and so forth. You're speaking at 2 of them. I'm speaking at 1 of them. So that's coming up. And then Joby Strobo, their business development person there, got a promotion. So shout out to Joby. She's with us pretty regularly here on the broadcast. So if you're with us today, Joby, congratulations on your promotion at ISA. Second to lastly, each week we have what we describe also as a good, what I call a good read. This week it's a good listen. These are usually coming from another source like an Inc. magazine or something like that. This week, Inc. magazine launched a cool new podcast, and it's called, this particular one is about the untold story about how the internet almost didn't happen. So if you get a chance, go to Inc. magazine, look that one up if you're a podcast listener. And I found it pretty interesting. I only got about a third of the way through it, but it's a pretty cool story. And it's a whole series of them on that podcast. Did you check that one out, Tom? Do you mark it?
I saw it. I haven't listened to the podcast.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It starts off with a woman kind of telling a story about her childhood. And I'm like, wait, am I listening to the right one? And then she goes in to talk about how her father was one of the early developers of what we now know as the internet. And so kind of interesting. So I'd like to share those. So this week it's a good listen, not a good read. Last thing we'll talk about today in depth at all is what we do each week, where we call our tech spotlight. And so this is an article, and it references retailers, but everything I read in there ties right into wholesale as well. And it talks about customers are starting to use ChatGPT to shop. And it talks about here's what retailers, and I say what wholesale distributors need to know. And this is an interesting topic, right? We talked about 3 weeks ago, Tom, about Walmart now is they're literally negotiating contracts with a group of vendors in a specific part of their company solely through AI, with no in-person, no phone discussions, no Zooms, no anything. They're getting the negotiations done using AI. So I like this article. There's some cool stuff in there.
Yeah, and we can chat more about this in a later show. I know we're a little short on time today, but the whole concept of what we know is search, right? Everything we've done today, whether it's shopping, is search. So we search for things, and then we sort through options, and then we try and make a decision based on the options that we're sorting through. And what this was talking about, or starting to talk about, is that experience of search as we have traditionally known it is more and more going to get replaced with conversational, if you want to call it. It's not even conversational search. I call it conversational discovery, right? Whereas search is, hey, I'm looking for something. Now I have to search through all this data to figure out what it is I'm going to use. Whereas conversational discovery is using conversation back and forth to discover what it is that I need to know. And in this case, related to shopping. So I completely believe that conversational discovery will replace search, especially as it relates to shopping. And that will be true both, as we talked about earlier, with manufacturers and distributors for e-commerce. Obviously, that conversational experience and discovery has to be good and have to make sense. Right now, you can decide what, when you search, what makes sense and what doesn't. But that's coming and will continue to come. And it ties into everything else we just have been talking about today.
Yeah. So I totally agree with that. Just what I found really interesting is the last kind of part of that was that they talk in that article about different SEO tips and different tools and stuff that you can use some great AI to enhance website presence, enhance e-commerce. And I think those transfer really well over to that whole arena of wholesale distribution as well. What kind of triggered for me though is I look at all of this, right? Is I had an experience this week myself. I was trying to buy a piece of home entertainment equipment for my father. And I speak a little bit about my parents are slowing down quite a bit and need a lot more help and assistance with things. And Dad loves to watch sports and television, and I want his viewing time to be great. So I was struggling with TiVo. I'll just call them out who they are. Their website was almost impossible to navigate to get the answer I was looking for about the product, what I needed, and if it required subscriptions and so forth. I went to ChatGPT. First time I'd done it. But you know what? I got what I was looking for that I couldn't get from their website.
Sure.
And their chat tool is antiquated in this day and age, is the chat tool that they have. So we're going to see more and more of that migrating on the
That's
wholesale
a great
distribution
example.
side.
Great example.
The
Right.
last piece I'll comment on this before we finish up today. It was pretty funny. Is we talked about 3 weeks ago about that Walmart example I shared earlier. So I was on the phone last Friday with a large pipe valve and fitting distributor in the Southeast that's hopefully going to be joining us as a valued LeadSmart customer here in the next few days. But we were going through some portions of our proposal and contract negotiations, and his response in the phone call as we were winding things down was, "All right, I needed to get this baseline information, but you're going to have to do the rest through. I'm going to negotiate the rest of this through AI with you." And he just started laughing, and he referenced back to having heard what. In fact, the day we talked about that, I think Mike Hockett was with us, and from MDM, and so I thought it was kind of funny because that came full circle back at me because he was joking at it, tongue in cheek and a smile on his face, but he goes, "Yeah, we're going to have to use AI for the rest of this negotiation." So that was pretty funny. So.
Yeah.
As we're winding down, Peter Newton-John from joining us from Miami Beach, Florida. Peter, thanks for being with us. Hopefully you caught more than what we're doing today. So last of things I didn't, Tom, mention, and I should have, before we go today, even looking through the calendar that's upcoming for a lot of the events that we do each week, is Modern Distribution Management, MDM. Mike joins us regularly. I don't know if Mike's with us today, but they, at the end of last week, published their top list of distributors by category. So if you haven't looked at that, it's of interest, go to mdm.com. You'll find it very easily. And I should have put that in the publication. I was remiss in that as it went out today. So lots of good stuff coming up. ISA summer session. Tell me which date you're speaking again.
Tuesday, this coming Tuesday.
This Tuesday.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yep.
I should probably listen to that.
Maybe.
Yep. So that's a great session. Industrial Supply Association.
I'm doing this Tuesday and next Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. But
yeah. And I think I'm on the 18th is where I think the one I'm doing is scheduled. So lots of trade association buying group stuff coming up that we're heading into that season, starting in July and through the end of the year. So good stuff. There's a lot of Emelco, the European electrical buying group, is having a big meeting right now in Rotterdam this week. So we'll start adding some international stuff into this as well because our international audience is growing. So, boy, that's it, man.
All right.
Covered a lot of ground.
Yeah. Thanks for all the great comments, good conversations. And I hope everyone has a good weekend.
Do great things. Be kind. Enjoy yourself. We'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks.